This is Tropicana Field, a cable-supported dome rising from a half-empty parking lot in St. Petersburg, Florida, the only permanently sealed ballpark in Major League Baseball. It opened in 1990, cost $130 million, and was built before any team agreed to play here. In 2024, the city and the Tampa Bay Rays finally signed a deal for a $1.3 billion replacement. 7 months later, Hurricane Milton shredded the roof in a single night. Within 5 months, the replacement deal was dead. The owner had sold the team, and St. Petersburg faced a $60 million bill to repair a stadium nobody was supposed to need again. This is the story of how one hurricane did not just destroy a roof, but destroyed a decade of promises, and why the city ended up paying to save a building everyone had already agreed to abandon. In the late 1970s, St. Petersburg set its sights on the big leagues. The city's pitch was simple: Florida's Gulf Coast deserved Major League Baseball, and if summer heat, humidity, and thunderstorms made outdoor games a gamble, then the answer was obvious: a dome. Mayor Corinne Freeman, the city's first woman to hold the office, became the face of this campaign. She rallied business leaders, city council, and the newly formed Pinellas Sports Authority, which the Florida legislature funded in 1980 with $125,000 just to study how to make it happen. By 1982, the city had earmarked 86 acres in the historic gas plant district, a patchwork of homes and businesses wiped clear by eminent domain, leased for a symbolic $1 a year for 3 decades. The tactics were bold. St. Pete courted every rumor of a restless ball club, but the real drama centered on the Chicago White Sox. In 1988, Sox owners Jerry Reinsdorf and Eddie Einhorn threatened to move south unless Illinois gave them a new stadium. St. Pete sent delegations, prepared incentive packages, and reportedly dangled $30 million as bait. For a brief, tense moment, the White Sox seemed ready to trade the Windy City for the dome. But Illinois blinked first, approving $150 million for a new Comiskey Park in a late-night legislative scramble. The Sox signed their lease and stayed put. St. Petersburg, meanwhile, was left with a stadium plan and no team to fill it. Undeterred, the city broke ground on the Florida Suncoast Dome on November 22, 1986. Construction rolled forward without a single guaranteed tenant, a classic case of build it and they will come. The project's price tag landed around $130 million, about $320 million in today's dollars. By March 3, 1990, the Dome opened its doors to a city still waiting for its baseball dream to materialize. The early years were a study in echoes. The cavernous interior hosted tennis, concerts, and the occasional minor league event, but the major leagues remained out of reach. In 1993, the NHL's Tampa Bay Lightning arrived, transforming the building into the Thunderdome for 3 seasons, while their own arena was under construction. Hockey brought crowds and noise, but it was always a stopgap. Then, in March 1995, Major League Baseball finally delivered. The league awarded St. Petersburg an expansion franchise, the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, alongside the Arizona Diamondbacks. A 30-year lease was signed in April. The first pitch would have to wait until 2019-98, but for the first time, the Dome had a permanent big league tenant. Before the inaugural season, the juice company Tropicana signed a naming rights deal in October 1996, rechristening the building Tropicana Field. The city and team poured another $70 to $85 million into renovations, reworking the stadium for baseball and trimming capacity from more than 45,000 to a cozier, tarp-draped configuration. The Devil Rays took the field in 1998, finally giving St. Petersburg the franchise it had chased for 2 decades. Still, the story was never just about baseball. The city had gambled on a stadium before it had a team, paid to lure tenants, and renovated for a sport that took years to arrive. That original leap of faith, building first and hoping the rest would follow, set the stage for every promise and every disappointment that followed. Tropicana Field's engineering was a study in both ambition and compromise. The city's solution to Florida's unpredictable weather was a permanent dome. No sliding roof, no open-air gamble, just a sealed bubble of baseball. While other cities chased the drama of retractable roofs, St. Petersburg went with a fixed cable-supported structure, locking in protection against rainouts and summer storms. The roof, stretching across 6 acres, was built from Teflon-coated fiberglass panels, each one suspended by a web of steel cable that, if laid end-to-end, would run the length of the state and back, about 180 miles. Early press releases boasted that this was the world's largest cable-supported dome, though later, even the roof's designers admitted it was second to the Georgia Dome. Still, it was the only fixed-dome stadium left in Major League Baseball by the 2020s, a stubborn relic in a league obsessed with open skies and fresh air. The logic behind the fixed roof was simple. Moving parts cost money, and the city's 1980s budget had limits. Engineers calculated that a retractable system would be a financial and structural nightmare for a site barely above sea level. Instead, the dome's sloped geometry was meant to shed rainwater and resist hurricane winds up to 115 miles per hour, a number that sounded impressive until the day it wasn't enough. Inside, the roof's support rings and catwalks hovered over the field, forming a sort of mechanical cloud. These weren't just for maintenance, they became part of the game itself. Balls striking the lowest catwalks stayed in play, while a lucky ricochet off another could count for a home run, or just as easily be ruled dead. Fans and broadcasters spent years debating the ground rules, and visiting players often left muttering about pop flies that turned into chaos. The stadium's quirks didn't stop overhead. In right field, a touch tank held live cow-nose rays, a nod to local sea life, and a marketing experiment that occasionally left visiting teams wondering if they'd wandered into an aquarium. Elsewhere, the Ted Williams Hitters Hall of Fame tried to inject a bit of baseball legend into a building that often felt more like a convention center than a cathedral of sport. Capacity, too, told its own story. The stadium was built for more than 45,000. But as the years passed and empty seats multiplied, upper decks were tarped off, reducing usable seats to just over 25,000. By the 2020s, it was one of the smallest parks in the majors, a far cry from the grand ambitions of its opening. Geography didn't help. St. Petersburg sits across the bay from Tampa, making every home game a test of patience for commuters. Even when the Rays made the World Series in 2008 and 2020, crowds lagged behind league averages, fueling the endless debate about whether the dome's engineering or its address was the real culprit. In the end, the Trop was less a futuristic marvel than a monument to stubbornness, a stadium built to solve one problem, only to reveal a dozen more hiding in the rafters. By the early 2000s, the old dome's awkward location and age had become a regional sore spot, fueling a carousel of stadium replacement plans that never seemed to land. Proposals surfaced and fizzled. Some called for a waterfront ballpark, others for a glassy new home in Tampa's Ybor City, but each time, the finish line moved. The Ybor City plan collapsed in 2018, undone by shaky financing and a city-county rivalry that left both sides frustrated. Meanwhile, the original site, the 86 acres of the historic gas plant district, carried its own unresolved history. Decades earlier, this was a thriving black neighborhood, erased by eminent domain with the promise of jobs and opportunity that never fully arrived. In 2024, St. Petersburg and the Rays struck what looked like the long-awaited deal, a $1.3 billion agreement to build a new ballpark as the anchor for a massive redevelopment of the gas plant site. The plan was more than baseball. It promised affordable housing, new businesses, and a measure of civic repair for families displaced in the 1980s. Mayor Ken Welch, who grew up just blocks from the gas plant, made the project personal. His administration framed it as a chance to right an old wrong and finally connect the city's future to its forgotten past. On paper, the July 2024 agreement tied together memory, land, and money. Officials on both sides called it a generational fix, a solution to decades of broken promises. But the entire structure, financial, political, and literal, depended on nothing going wrong before the first shovel hit the ground. Hurricane Milton made landfall on October 10, 2024, as a Category 3 storm, hitting the Tampa Bay area with wind gusts that topped the original design limits of Tropicana Field's roof. The dome, engineered in the 1980s to withstand up to 115 miles per hour, faced gusts well above that threshold. By midnight, the stadium's 6-acre roof, a patchwork of Teflon-coated fiberglass panels, had been shredded. In a matter of hours, the translucent membrane was gone, leaving catwalks and lighting rigs exposed to open sky. Aerial footage from national outlets captured the aftermath, a stadium built to keep out the weather now wide open to it. Inside, the damage was immediate and relentless. With no drainage system, because the dome was never meant to be open, rain poured directly onto the field, concourses, clubhouses, and broadcast booths. Water pooled on the artificial turf and ran down concrete ramps, soaking electrical systems and warping floors. Equipment, memorabilia, and even the famed right field touch tank were left vulnerable. The building itself, a concrete shell with steel supports, survived the storm structurally intact, but the interior was a disaster zone, unfit for any event, let alone Major League Baseball. In the hours before the roof gave way, Tropicana Field had been serving as a staging hub for first responders, coordinating rescue and relief efforts for the city. Officials managed to relocate emergency operations just before the failure. No injuries were reported in connection with the roof collapse, a small consolation in a night otherwise defined by loss. The first assessment put the total repair bill at $55.7 million, with $22.5 million earmarked just for roof panel replacement. Those figures soon became a point of contention as the city scrambled to cover both immediate fixes and long-term restoration. But the bigger blow was to the schedule. Repairs couldn't be finished in time for the 2025 season. The Rays, already committed to a new $1.3 billion ballpark, suddenly had nowhere to play, and St. Petersburg was left holding both the old dome and the repair bill. What was supposed to be a smooth transition became a logistical crisis, with every missed game a reminder of the risks built into the city's original leap of faith. On March 13, 2025, Stuart Sternberg stepped to a podium and made it official. The Rays were withdrawing from the $1.3 billion stadium agreement. The reason, he said, was a cascade of setbacks that began the previous October. Milton's winds, the shredded roof, the missed construction window, and a financial fallout that left the entire project in limbo. Sternberg reportedly called it a series of events beginning in October, as insurance disputes and repair estimates kept ballooning. For St. Petersburg, the news landed with a thud. Mayor Ken Welch called the decision a major disappointment, but not a surprise. He warned that the city would still honor its obligations to repair Tropicana Field, regardless of the franchise's future. The city council committed to more than $60 million in repairs, determined not to let the dome become a monument to loss, at least not yet. With their home uninhabitable, the Rays packed up for George M. Steinbrenner Field, the Yankees' spring training park across the bay. The conversion from a minor league diamond to a big league stadium took about 120 hours, 5 days of round-the-clock work, just to make the field playable for opening day. For the first time in franchise history, the Rays played an entire home season under open skies. The Florida summer did not cooperate. 17 rain delays stretched across 16 home games, chewing up nearly 18 hours of playtime. But demand soared. 61 of 81 home dates sold out, as fans packed the stands to watch a team with no permanent address. By autumn, the franchise itself was on the move. Reports confirmed a sale to a group led by Patrick Zalupski, a Jacksonville developer, for $1.7 billion. The new owners inherited a team with sellout crowds but no long-term home, and a city still paying off repairs for a stadium the team had just tried to leave. The question of where the Rays would play in 2026 and who would foot the next bill remained as tangled as ever. Responsibility for the battered stadium landed exactly where the lease said it would, on St. Petersburg's desk, not the Rays. The city's legal team combed through the 1995 lease and confirmed it. Repairs after a disaster were the city's problem, not the team's. So while fans debated blame and the franchise weighed its next move, council members faced the reality of a stadium everyone had already agreed to leave, now requiring a fresh infusion of public money. Early estimates put the cost to repair Tropicana Field at $55.7 million, but the final obligation climbed higher. By January 2026, the city's total commitment had topped $60 million, including the full replacement of the roof. Officials separated the original emergency estimate from the final tally in council memos, careful to document each change order and expense. The city's capital projects ledger shows that 24 new roof panels were installed by November 21, 2025, each one ordered from a specialty manufacturer and hoisted into place over the course of 6 weeks. The interior work, seating, suites, and the playing surface wrapped up in January 2026, just in time for the scheduled reopening. The Rays, meanwhile, had lost their entire 2025 home season at Tropicana Field. The city and team negotiated a one-year lease extension, pushing the end date to 2028. It was a technicality that carried real cost. St. Petersburg paid to restore a stadium the signed replacement agreement had already labeled obsolete. The April 6, 2026, home opener against the Chicago Cubs became a kind of civic reset, with Mayor Ken Welch and Tampa's Jane Castor delivering a joint first pitch. Behind the ceremony, the old questions lingered. How many more times would the city pay to keep this building alive? With repairs finished and the Rays back in the building, the new ownership group wasted little time before reviving the stadium search. In January 2026, the city and developers signed a memorandum of understanding for a new site near Hillsborough Community College and Tampa International Airport. The model looked a lot like Atlanta's Truist Park, a ballpark surrounded by retail, restaurants, and apartments, all designed to create a year-round destination. But the ink on the MOU was barely dry before the next hurdles appeared. Financing, environmental review, local approvals, and community outreach were all unresolved. The promise of a new stadium remained just that, a promise, not a guarantee. The city had just spent more than $60 million fixing a stadium everyone had planned to leave. Whether the next ballpark would break the cycle or become the latest unfinished story was, once again, an open question. Two acts of faith, decades apart, now stand side by side on the same patch of Florida concrete. First, a city built a stadium on the promise that a team would come. Then, after disaster struck and the franchise nearly slipped away, the same city poured millions into repairs for a team that had already signed to leave. The reopening ceremony brought St. Petersburg's mayor and Tampa's Jane Castor to the mound together, two leaders from opposite sides of the bay, each throwing a first pitch, neither able to claim the future outright. Their presence made plain what the lease extensions and memoranda could not. The Rays' identity and their home remain unsettled. Every new renovation, every handshake deal, looks less like a solution and more like another patch on an old roof. The next ballpark, penciled in for 2029, is just the latest test. Until then, Tropicana Field waits, always ready to be the fallback when another promise falls through. Today, St. Petersburg pays over $60 million to restore a stadium everyone agreed to abandon, while the next $1.3 billion promise waits, uncertain. The city's faith keeps being tested, but the cycle of building, disaster, and repair remains unbroken. Is this just sunk cost or civic perseverance? What do you think should happen in 2029, and should the city have footed the bill? If you like deep dives like this, consider subscribing.